I'm honored to welcome you all to our 26th annual Barbara Jordan National Forum, honoring the life and the legacy of the former stateswoman and LBJ professor, Barbara Jordan. In Texas, we celebrate the Barbara Jordan Freedom Week as designated by the 82nd Texas Legislature. And today is extra special because today is Barbara Jordan's birthday. We are also gathered here today to bestow the LBJ School's highest honor on Congresswoman Bernice Johnson, whose lifetime of public service you're going to hear about shortly, and whose accomplishments really echo the aspirations of LBJ's great society. The theme of this year's Barbara Jordan National Forum is the beauty of perspective, advancing amid the discomfort of change, which is inspired by a quote from Jordan's 1976 keynote to the National Democratic Convention. She said, "We are a nation of innovation. We do not reject our traditions, but we are willing to adapt to changing circumstances. When change, we must. We are willing to suffer the discomfort of change in order to achieve a better future." End quote. Her words certainly still ring true today. Discomfort arises for those amongst us who seek to protect the civil rights championed by LBJ, Barbara Jordan, and EBJ. But today, discomfort also arises for those in our society who fail to acknowledge that their hearts and actions are still darkened by racial animus. To live up to the promise of our democracy, and that's what Barbara Jordan demanded of every LBJ student and each of us, we must reach out, we must connect, we must converse with one another. And yes, it is uncomfortable, but we must all live up to our proclaimed values and build upon our common humanity. I want to thank the LBJ Presidential Library for hosting today's forum. I want to recognize the collaboration and sponsorship of the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation. Together, we are ensuring that this forum is a true reflection of Barbara Jordan's values and how we can continue her pursuit of social justice and integrity in public service. Barbara Jordan, as I have learned in my 18 months as dean, cared deeply about the development of her students here at the LBJ School. Every alum that was ever in her class, when I asked them what was most important to you and your development as a student, would start with Barbara Jordan's class. And in fact, we have an oral history project that we've just commenced. Students were incredibly important to her because she was fully aware that she was training the next generation of leaders. And one special aspect of today's forum, and this forum every year since her passing, is that it is led by LBJ School students. And it remains to this day a student-led initiative. So in closing, it's my great pleasure to now introduce to you the student co-chairs of this year's forum, Morgan Brown, Jennifer Perales, and Jordan Nellums. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Dean DeShazo. My name is Morgan Brown, and I'm a master's student from San Antonio, Texas, and at the LBJ School, studying the public affairs and public health, focusing on social and health policy. Barbara Jordan taught at the LBJ School of Public Affairs from 1979 to 1996 as a Lyndon B. Johnson Centennial Chair of Public Policy. It was a final chapter of her long career as a public servant, civil rights leader, educator, and policymaker. Her contributions to history and to the education of future changemakers act as a lodestar to the school and its mission. And each year, the Barbara Jordan National Forum honors her memory by selecting a keynote speaker who not only encapsulates Barbara Jordan's voice and values, but who also attests to her legacy's effect in bridging communities through their own activism. Who is more befitting than a fellow Texan with a trailblazing legacy, defending and advancing racial equity in the Texas House, Texas Senate, and the U.S. Congress? Congresswoman Bernice Johnson served 15 terms in the U.S. Congress, representing the 30th Congressional District of Dallas, Texas. Congresswoman Johnson has a reputation as a stateswoman who works with both parties to get things done, one earned during her more than 40 years in public office. She is recognized as one of the most effective legislators in Congress, credited with authoring and co-authoring more than 300 bills passed by the House and Senate and signed into law. She is the first African American and female to chair the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and was the dean of the Texas Congressional Delegation. She was also the dean of the Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona Democratic Congressional Delegation, the highest-ranking Texan on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and was the first registered nurse elected to the U.S. Congress. She began her career as the first female African-American chief psychiatric nurse at the VA hospital in Dallas. In 1972, she became the first registered nurse elected to the Texas State House and achieved the same distinction upon her election to the Texas State Senate in 1986. From 2011 to 2018, she served as the House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology's first African-American and female ranking member. She was honored to serve as the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus during the 107th Congress, and her acclaimed initiative, A World of Women for World Peace, has gained national and international recognition. Please join me in welcoming Congresswoman Bernice Johnson to the LBJ School and the LBJ Presidential Library.
Hello, my name is Jennifer Prellis, and I'm a master's student from Houston, Texas, at the LBJ School studying public affairs with a focus on voting rights and media. I have the great privilege to be a student co-chair of the Barbara Jordan National Forum. This opportunity has given me a way to underscore the important role Barbara Jordan played in civic engagement. My goal as a chair is to help showcase the work Barbara Jordan accomplished during her time in and out of office. There is an urgency to the work she has done throughout her life that persists and should not be forgotten. Our theme this year is the beauty of perspective advancing amid the discomfort of change. Barbara Jordan said the following to the nation: "We are willing to suffer the discomfort of change in order to achieve a better future. We have a positive vision of the future, that on the belief the gap between the promise and reality of America can one day finally be closed." Those were the words Barbara Jordan spoke during the keynote address during the Democrat National Convention in 1976. I believe those words are still reflective of issues and circumstances we are still experiencing today, 47 years later. Change can be gradual and not fast enough for some, and at the same time, it seems we are regressing almost 50 years later. Yet we have experienced change and growth because of women like Barbara Jordan and Bernice Johnson. We have achieved and we have changed because they reached past the obstacles and stood in their way, because they lifted the gates and barriers for all of us. The Barbara Jordan Public Service Award is conferred to the trailblaze leader who has personified Professor Jordan's unwavering commitment to social justice and public service. Congresswoman Bernice Johnson has served for 50 years in public service to the people of Dallas and the state of Texas. Like Barbara Jordan, Congresswoman Johnson was a woman of many firsts. She served as a mentor, role model to many as she fostered inclusion and belonging with the state, local, and national politics, and led with great courage and compassion. It is my great pleasure to present Congresswoman Bernice Johnson with the Barbara Jordan Public Service Award.
All the way with Hello, my name is Jordan Ellums. I am a master's student from Missouri City, Texas at the LBJ School studying public affairs with a focus in education policy. Moderating today's keynote conversation with Congresswoman Johnson is the new Chief Executive Officer at the Texas Tribune following a national search. Sonal Shah has started and led social impact efforts in academia, government, and the private and philanthropic sectors for over 25 years. Previously, she served as the intern executive vice president at the United Way Worldwide. Sonal founded the Asian American Foundation in Houston and founded and led Georgetown University's Beek Center for Social Impact and Innovation. Her background in government and policy include leading the White House Office of Social Innovation and Civic Participation in the Obama administration, serving as an international economist at the Department of Treasury, and as a policy director for Pete Buttigieg's presidential campaign. In the private sector, Sonal led Goldman Sachs' environmental strategy and Google's global technology and impact investment initiatives. Sonal grew up in Houston, earned a BA in economics from the University of Chicago, and a master's in economics from Duke University. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Sonal Shah.
Jordan, thank you for that great introduction. I also want to thank the LBJ School. I grew up in Houston, and I feel like I came to the LBJ School almost every other week. It was my parents' outing. We had to come and continue to learn here, so it's been great to be here. And also for the great graduates that the LBJ School has. I have some of my best friends have graduated from here and have just been incredible friends, colleagues, policymakers, just people I've learned to admire, so thank you for all of the work. And Congresswoman, I just want to say, I am not just here moderating a conversation with you, I'm fangirling you, because I have been watching everything you've been doing for so many years. Growing up in Houston, you were one of the many leaders that we continue to follow, and our parents always pointed out, you should watch what Congresswoman Johnson's doing. You should be listening to that. So I really appreciate it, and it's such an honor to be here with you today. So thank you for everything that you have done. You've heard her bio, and it's just an incredible bio, but just to highlight 50 years of public service, 30 years in the US Congress. That is a lot of change that you have seen over the years, and everything that you have done in your career to drive the change that's been happening. But I'd love to just start with you personally. You grew up in Waco, Texas. How did you come to political office? Like, how did you went to the VA, you were working as a nurse in the VA. Like, tell us a little bit about that. How did you get there, your background? You have an amazing story about the VA itself and your acceptance as a nurse there.
Well, let me first thank you for having me, everyone being here, and thank you. I suppose that I have to give another Texan credit for helping to direct me. I grew up in a family that was always active civically and church-wise. And coming to Dallas was a challenge, like anywhere you'd live almost. And there was a young man that I was in high school with in Waco that really surprised me when he told me he was going to be a minister, came to Dallas, go to SMU. At that time, he was coming from Austin because his father had been moved from Waco to Austin as a Methodist minister. And I joined his team, and we were working with a number of others, walking from door to door, collecting money to bring about a lawsuit for single-member districts. And we won that lawsuit. And then there were community meetings going on, and I was on the team of trying to bring people together to see who we could support the new opportunity that we had. And his name was Zan Wesley Holmes, Jr. And he got up in the middle of the meeting and said, he was asking me to step off this panel for making these decisions. And I was personally kind of struck because I had been kind of his eyes and ears in the community when he was in the Texas House. And he said, the main reason I want her to step off this committee because I want to put her name in nomination for becoming a candidate for the Texas House. And that changed my course of my future. I said, okay. I wasn't quite sure. Filing deadline, I was at home helping my son with his homework, and I got a call from Dr. Conrad, who was a neighbor, that said, do you know this is filing deadline? And the polls close in 30 minutes. And so I said, well, okay. I got in the car and started down. The traffic was so heavy I had to park and run about 2 blocks to get there, and I got there at 1 minute after 6. And there was a person there who had filled out some papers for me, a former Dallas Cowboy named Sim Stokes. And he said, all I need is your check for $50, which I did not have. That they gave me 30 days to get the $50. And I became a candidate. I walked from door to door, and I raised a landmark amount of money, $5,000. And I've never lost since then.
It's amazing.
But I always saw it as a privilege and a challenge, and felt the need to make the people feel that they were not making a mistake to cast their votes for me. And so I have met so many wonderful people along the way, and some maybe not so wonderful, but they were Americans. And I'm a native Texan, and I am a Texan true and true. And even in our delegation, we might have some differences, but we were all Texans. There were a couple of that might not have been born in Texas, but we made sure that they acted like they were.
Well, you know, you've always found a way, whether it's in the Texas House, the Texas Senate, or the U.S. Congress, to find a way to work together with people and pass landmark legislation and over 200 bills in the Congress. You have authored or co-authored, and that is no small feat. And getting, not only just co-authoring them and authoring them, but getting them passed, which is a feat in itself. So how do you do it? What allows you to bring people together?
Well, I think my psychiatric background probably. To see people as individuals, not duplicates, not expect duplication. And if I wanted respect, I felt I had to give respect. So I didn't expect everyone to think like me. As a matter of fact, I learned from so many different perspectives. But some of the people that others considered crazy, and privately I did too, I was able to work with, primarily because I would just say, tell me, how did you get that idea? And get them talking. Because it was not that many differences, whether you were urban or rural, in the needs of districts in Texas. You could always find some commonality if you stuck to the issue and not the person. And so I tried to do that. I also realized that they were making a step that they probably had never experienced in working with a black woman from Waco, Texas. And many of them, most of them were white men from various places. I had true respect and really wanted to learn how some of these stupid ideas, in my judgment, that they came to appreciate so well. I wanted to see maybe the background, or tell me, how did you reach this, and tell me what the good of this will be. And sometimes we would end up both moving a nudge or two in order to work together. I get teased a lot from Republican Texans about working with so many kind of strange at times attitudes that we have. But Texas is a big state, and we have every climate, every terrain, every need, and every smartness and every dumbness that you can think of in our state. It's a great collection of the nation, throughout the nation. And so I've enjoyed working each and every one of them. One or two, not so much, but that goes with the turf.
Well, I mean, you've had so many pieces of legislation, I could go through all of them, and I will highlight a few of them, but one of the big ones, just most recently, is the CHIPS Act. And I know it's something that you have worked on for a long time, and it's lots of pieces of legislation coming together, but I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what it means to have gotten that passed, and also what it means for Texas.
Well, thank you very much. I feel very fortunate that in Texas, I had a chance to meet all of the founders of Texas Instruments, listen to them, see their actions, see how much they gave and added to leadership, that it got my attention when Dr. John Kilby developed that chip. And at the time, it was big as a plate. Now,
Your thumbnail.
you can't see it with the naked eye. That changed the world. I mean, absolutely has impacted the entire world. And then space exploration just fascinated me so much that my first term in the Texas House with Carlos Truon, we came together and we passed legislation that tried to make it mandatory to include women and minorities in the educational preparation to be ready for these new challenges. And so that became kind of something that I have stayed with over the years, and we need it now more than ever before. Passing legislation in the House is just half of the job, as you know. So many of those pieces of legislation I'd passed over and over. When I went to this committee, which was the two committees that I served on, I stayed the whole time. There was one other woman who was a Republican woman, Connie Morella from Maryland, that came my buddy. We were the two that snickered all the time about these men. But we started to look at women and minority participation and tried to figure out a way to make sure that they were always included in every aspect. And we had to do a lot of research. So the first thing we had to do is pass legislation to do the research, because when you bring up something about we need to include minorities, somebody somewhere in this nation in the form of a white male would say, how do we know we need to do that? Well, we had to do all the research to prove the background of having that need. And so over the years, we were able to do that. And I just kept introducing this legislation over and over, maybe improving it just a little bit in words, but expanding it. Getting with rural people, because see, I'm from an urban district, but lots of aspects of that district is very rural. And trying to make sure that it got covered. I went to the rural people and said, we need to work together on making sure you have this, this, and this, knowing that I was going to get it in my district too. And so it became kind of a common thing with me we have directories that has everybody's telephone numbers. I wear them out because you got to find your votes, and you got to find something in common with somebody when you're looking for your votes. And I would find somebody like maybe Tennessee or Mississippi, Alabama, and say, you know what, I found in your area, your district, that you could use such and such and such. Why don't you join me and let's do some legislation to address this, because a portion of my district is just like yours. And so just expanding that, making sure that when I got the help, they were also getting some help, that we would be able to do pretty well. So that became my method of trying to get things done. I can't say that I got it all done immediately. Some things that takes a long time to get done, and that's the fact. And some of the legislation that we passed the House maybe more than one time and hadn't been able to get it out of the Senate. There was in the Senate, however, the chair and ranking member were both people I had worked with in the House. One Republican from Mississippi, and a Democrat from the state of Washington, I believe, or Oregon. And so I communicated back and forth a lot with those two. And they became committed to helping on that side. And we knew we had to pass the CHIPS part of this. But I also knew that my best bet for getting the rest of this put together would be to attach it to CHIPS. So I held CHIPS up until I negotiated with the Speaker, with the leader in the Senate, and the other chairs and the White House to attach these 17 or 18 other bills that had passed the House by a bipartisan vote. We didn't pass anything in our committee under my leadership without a bipartisan vote. And that's how we achieved it. So once we got it, there were 100 people on this conference committee, because our leader in the Senate had promised everybody that they could have heaven and hell in this bill. And so all I did was negotiate my part. I did not try to put all that other stuff that was going to change this country to another one in that bill. And I just kept leaning on the Speaker, and I said, Madam Speaker, you got to stay with what's relevant to this bill. So we won out, and that was the greatest achievement that I made in this entire last term. And I think that everyone here will see the value of having passed that piece of legislation.
Absolutely. There is so much you said in the last statement, in the last set of statements, and one, just how you negotiated with different constituencies to make sure that you can get what you want, but also ensuring the integrity of the bill and getting the things that you wanted in there. But so much of that, I mean, and especially for all of you as students, so much of that is the negotiations that take place and ensuring that happens.
If you only knew. But that's all a part of that process, and it's not for public view.
Right. Right. Well, I just want to highlight a few of the other bills. I'm not going to highlight all of them, but she authored the Suicide Hotline Designation Act, which requires the FCC to designate 988 as a universal telephone number for suicide prevention and mental health crisis. That is a huge and hugely impactful and important. We talk about the mental health crisis, but you actually did something about making sure we can actually address it.
Well, all I thought about, if somebody's thinking about suicide, they're not going to remember 1, 8, 8, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're thinking about suicide. So I thought we needed to make it as simple as possible. It took several terms to get it done, but we did get it done.
Thank you for all of that work on that, because I know how important it is. You were also one of the most influential members in bringing back infrastructure funding to North Texas. I know you were just also talking about, just in the back when we were back there, you were talking about how one of the projects that you funded many years ago finally got started here in Dallas.
Yes, my first real bill that I introduced going into Congress was that mixed master of the downtown where all those interstates came together. And it actually passed. And it was finished about a year ago. It had been restructured, but more importantly, when President Bush was in office, the war came about and they pulled the money back. And then afterwards, we released it again. But the important thing is, it is now done, whether you can read the signs and get the right direction or not. That's still yet to be determined. But that is done. But I had no clue what the importance of transportation to this state before I went to Washington. But Jack Brooks, who was the dean of our delegation, suggested that since I didn't get what I wanted as a committee because I was interested in health care, I wanted either energy and commerce or ways and means. And he said, that was over 30 years ago now, freshmen don't get those committees. And I said, well, you know, I've been on first before. He said, on this, you're not going to be a first here, but you might be ready next time. So work your magic and try to see what you can do. In the meantime, take science and take transportation. I said, okay. Well, I was working real hard during that first term to be ready to move, and we lost the majority. And so they lost people on those committees, and I decided, let me just stay where I am because I'm doing okay right now. And so that ended up being my 2 committees for my entire term. Science was a natural for me, but I never left my desire to help with health care. But I've also not denied the opportunity to work on health care policy, and I was
You were a big part of
major
the
person with
Affordable Care Act.
the Obama legislation, because what we discovered was no person in the Democratic Party had done hospital nursing, or even, we had 1 or 2 physicians, one was a psychiatrist, but anyway, when they'd start talking about something, I said, oh, you can't do that. So they said, okay, get on the committee and help us, so I did. On the special committee for that piece of legislation. It's not perfect yet, but it's better than what we had.
It has many uninsured insured now, so thank you for being a part of that legislation. That was a transformative piece of legislation.
Thank you.
So, you know, what has changed in Congress since your 30 years that you've been there? Like, what have you seen that's changed?
It has been a major change, and I think a very serious major change from both ends of the spectrum. And I really attribute it to redistricting. We had some people that were very, the whole time I've been there, we've had people very opposite of me, but not beyond common sense. The last 2 or 3 elections, we had some people that have really skewed the balance. And in a country of a democracy, you got to understand that it is a democracy. You got to listen to every kind of opinion, listen to the reasons for those opinions, and that comes a part of the mix. Because whether you live in Connecticut or Mississippi or wherever, Texas, everybody there got there by the same process. And you all equally interested in representing your constituency, or should be. We're beyond that pole now, and it does trouble me a lot. And I'm hoping that somehow, some way, that's the one thing that technology can be influenced rather than influenced, because when they were drawing these lines with pencils and having to use creeks in order to make them work, they're now picking people. Right. They can split a bedroom. And And I'm not so sure that is the healthiest thing for this country. There's too much time being spent addressing personalities rather than issues. And not anybody with enough stroke or courage to address it head on. When I saw that the speaker had to keep giving up to get votes to be speaker, it was frightening.
Right.
Because I had no clue what all that was going to be that he's given up, that he now has to stand for once it's given up. That's unfortunate, and I don't think it's healthy for our nation.
Yeah, it is worrisome at many levels, but I think your point on redistricting and really thinking about technology as an enabler of doing the right, as opposed to just the disabler.
Well, you know, anything can be good or bad, and technology, anything misused
Absolutely.
can be abused. We now have more of a problem of security throughout the world, but do we give up what gets us there, or do we attempt to mediate and negotiate it? We can't give up where we are.
Absolutely.
But it really challenges us to deal with where we are. All these balloons that were floating around last week, and I was just, I don't like war. And I didn't know what war was until I went to Bosnia the first time. It was very troubling trying to figure out whether and how we were going to react to what we thought this was. And that is our challenge for the future. It's going to rest with a lot of technology because, frankly speaking, I have attempted to avail myself with the knowledge of what does go on and what can go on in all the various agencies. We have the best spying mechanism, I think, possible in the world. And to go out there and to sit there and they say, well, what would you like to see next? Would you like to see a street in Korea? And they, and there it is. Or would you like to look at Iran? And it's there. We know, we have people who are aware of what goes on in the world. And when it gets to the point where we're wondering where a balloon might have come, then you know it's time for us to make better relationships, open dialogue, because this planet is not going to be secure with anything. We've got to have order. And so that is a major concern of mine now. And because for the most part, we've been a peaceful nation. We have a lot of things here that's not peaceful. We have a lot more violence than what I would ever imagine we could even tolerate. But it's nothing like war.
Right.
When my father went to World War II, I had no clue what it was. The first time that I was able to go and see in the middle of Bosnia, I was just blown away. And then to go to Iraq, and we don't want war. We do not want war. And so whatever we can do to avoid it, I'm willing to support that.
And you started an initiative for women to participate in peace building.
Yes, when I had just returned from the World Conference Against Racism in Africa, and was speaking at a church that Sunday night, and I said there was so much feeling in this conference and so much intensity that I'd never seen in the United States, even though I was born here and born in the South in the middle of racism, that I just cannot see something not coming from this. I went back to Washington that Monday morning, and that Tuesday morning we had 9/11. I was sitting in the Capitol, and all of a sudden, the loud noise came through, "Get out of the building, get out of the building." And I ran out, and as I ran out, I could see the Pentagon burning. And I thought we had war. And I thought, oh, this cannot be. I came home, and I had a meeting with the Asian women that weekend, and I said, women can impact this because we give birth to every human being. Do you think that we could pull something together to talk about focusing on peace rather than war as being a solution? And they all stood up and gave me a clap, and so I started this program called A World of Women for World Peace. It has 56 countries now, although not nearly as active as it was back then. And I use Radio Free Europe and Voice of America and a lot of Zoom and with even Chinese women. But we have very strong organizations around the globe now, and women will come from around the country. I helped to write the Constitution for Bahrain with women who wanted to make sure they were in the Constitution. And also for Iraqi women. And it's been very gratifying. I've had lots of work in Israel with the Women in Black and Seeds of Peace, trying to get the notion that we can, as a planet, exist in peace. Probably the largest groups I've had, and in person have been maybe 1,100 people, and that was in Taiwan. But even Chinese women at college level, I've had different audiences, and I've spoke electronically as well as in person. No matter where you go in the world, people want peace. But getting there is a different story. And what we've learned is that women have never been at the front table in these other countries as well. And so, and sometimes I use the fact that I'm the only woman in the delegation, sometimes the only black too, just to get attention. I'll say, where are the women? When we go into these large, very elegant conference rooms, and all of them are men, all over the world. And I said, I just like to meet another woman. They look at me like, where'd you come from? But it's sensitized some. And so we now have more women at the table. I said to Mr. Netanyahu, in not this administration, but the one he's before, I said, we need peace talks again, and we need to involve women. That's because women give birth to these people, and they don't want them killed in war. And he just gave me a little bow, like, and so that was it, but he had to think about it.
Absolutely.
Women, I think, would make if we could just get a majority, and there's nothing against men, women are much more sensitive to peace because we don't want our girls and boys to be on that front line knowing that their lives are going to be at stake for perhaps even just reasons. But we still think that peace is a better plan to work for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think you know, Congresswoman, I started my early career in Bosnia, actually, doing post-conflict reconstruction. So I know what the aftermath of that feels like and cleaning up the pieces. So I fully appreciate. And I think, you know, having more women not just participate in the peace process, but running for office, participating in.
Well, that's what this movement
dialogue.
has actually started to do. is get women around the world to run for office. They come in droves to the Capitol to visit with me to see how to do it. And we've seen some results of women.
It's amazing. So I want to bring a little bit of this back to here. How do you think about women, especially Black and brown women, running for office more now in the U.S. and seeing more, having more diversity in our legislatures?
I truly support it because it's that balance. You know, when a man runs for office and he's got a wife and children at home, he doesn't have to worry too much about those children. Somebody keeping things. In my first term in the House, I was being interviewed in Waco, my hometown. They said, what is it do you think that a woman needs to run for office? And I said, a wife. And I said that because a man doesn't have to worry about getting his clothes to the cleaners. He doesn't have to worry about his meals or going to the grocery store. He doesn't have to worry about the kids getting to school and getting home. He's free to be all in and thinking in this job. A woman doesn't leave all that at home when she goes to office. She has to take all that with her. Are there any women elected officials? So you understand what I'm talking about. You still got to see that your clothes are clean, that your kids are cared for, that your house is in order, and still do the same amount of work in office. And so I think the more women that go into office, the more sensitization you might have in what all it takes to put all this together. And perhaps even sensitize a few men as to what it's like to be a woman supporting them in office. It's not easy.
No, no. And you did this for over 50 years, and making that happen, and that is no small thing. So, and back and forth. I know we were talking.
And you have to schedule your family. You have to make sure that you make the time for your family. It's important that they understand where you're spending all this time. And even with that, they never really understand, because I never had to stay up all night to do anything until I got to D.C. It was nothing to work all night, because you couldn't do it during the day. You're busy doing other things. And I saw the sun come up so many days that would give me a clue that it was time to put this down, get a shower, and get dressed to go to work. Because you can't do it in a regular 8 hours and be successful. You gotta spend so much time preparing. Now, I sometimes think, I see people come and all they do is sit there and vote and go home and they're okay. I can't do that. It's just not my makeup. I wanna see what I can do to make things better somewhere for somebody. And you got to put in that time to do it. There's no way to get around it.
Well, you have a reputation on the Hill as having some of the best staff that have worked for you. I know your staff get poached a lot because you have some of the, everybody wants your training. Tell us a little bit about how you have invested in the next generation. I know you were also a big supporter of Hakeem Jeffries to become Speaker of the House. So tell us a little bit about your...
Well, first of all, I learned as a nurse that you have to have procedures. So I believed in job descriptions. I knew exactly what I wanted staff to do. I knew I would hire them to concentrate on certain areas. And I would write the descriptions. I've had colleagues come from all around the nation and around the state to come to my office to see
job descriptions.
Job descriptions. And I hire by job descriptions, and I fire by job descriptions. Because I hire people to do certain things that I need, not stuff that just is not play stuff. If they can do that, they can stay, but then that's who everybody wants.
Right.
If they can't do that, then I have to slide them on around there and get somebody else because I have to have that staff support. If anybody tells you they can function in an office without good staff support, it's not the truth. You've got to have good staff support. And so I have tried, and everybody wants my staff, and it means that I have to spend a lot of money trying to keep them. Because they know one thing, if they stay in my office 6 months, they are disciplined and they're directed. And not much I can do about that. I just believe in doing what it takes to try to be successful, and you cannot do it without a good body of knowledge and some leadership in making sure that we find a way to get that knowledge dispersed. Because everything is done by votes. And you got to convince a majority on a committee on the floor in order to pass legislation.
Well, I think many young people who have worked in Washington and around the state in your office know and understand the discipline that they have gotten because they are valued commodities. And they're valued for the amount of work that you have put into making them that great. So thank you for doing that. And I've had the pleasure of working with many of them, and I really have learned a lot from them. And the clarity. I think, one of the things that you have mentioned in the past is that one regret you have had is not to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. And can you expand on what it's going to take to make that happen?
I really wish I could. I think that it really has gotten to a point where I think people have not necessarily concentrated on the value of everyone having an opportunity to vote and not see it as a threat. I'm not proud of my state and how we've handled the right to vote. It's almost as if they don't want certain people to vote for fear it might change something. That's a democracy. If it's not democracy if you cannot listen often to the voters, and then if you remove the validity of a substantial group of voters, you're fooling yourself because you really don't have the direction of the voters. That's very troubling. It's very troubling because if you look at the trends, states attack the same issues at the same time.
Right.
It's a national organization that's very conservative that comes together like a convention, and they work out these things together, and then every state addresses them together. And sometimes I wonder if they realize that they are working against democracy, because democracy is what you make it through its people, but not as directed by a small segment of people who is not interested in being a real democracy. If we don't get to that point, we'll see dissatisfaction in many areas. I think some of the violence we see on the streets and the anger outbursts and all that goes right back to people feeling deprived of their own rights. I'm troubled by that. I am troubled that there are people, it seems, in the nation that don't want the real choices that they fear people would vote for. That's most unfortunate. Because generally speaking, people are people.
Right.
If they're real crazy, they'll choose the Republican Party, of course. But I have worked with people who are Republicans as closely as I have with people who are Democrats. And the things that we disagree on, we agree to disagree on them. when somebody asked me who my favorite presidents were, and I mentioned, you mean the ones that I work with? And the presidents that I work with, Clinton and Bush were my favorites because I could communicate with them. We didn't agree on everything, but I could communicate. So I had worked with Mr. Bush as governor of this state, and we talked back and forth, and we continued that as he was president. Now, I couldn't agree on a lot of stuff that he was for, but we agreed to respect each other, and I had high regard for him. I was sitting at my desk one night, and my cell phone rang. And I thought, at 9:30 at night, who? And I said, yeah. He goes, Eddie Bernice? I said, who is this? He said, this is W. I said, who? And I thought to myself, how did he get my cell number? But I had to realize he was president. And then he vetoed one of my prize bills that I did get overridden. But when I went to the White House the next time, he goes, there's Miss Trinity. You know, so we still had a great working relationship, even though we didn't agree on a lot. Because I said to him, Mr. President, please don't veto this bill. We're spending less money in this bill than what your own administration says we should. But we've got to address flooding in North Texas. And so he said, that Trinity ain't gonna ever flood. I said, Mr. President, are you gonna move back to Dallas when you finish? And he said, if I can find a house I can afford. I said, well, give me the address. I want a trench built from that Trinity so when it floods, it'll come right to your door. And we laughed about it. I said, and that was all the time going through these 10 days that the president has to sign or veto a bill for this water bill. And I kept checking and checking and checking. He vetoed that bill the last 5 minutes of those 10 days. And I said, I called him and I said, give the president this message. He's gonna be sorry. And let me tell you why I knew he was gonna be sorry. Because every step of the way of that bill, I kept saying, if you want your project in it, you got to commit to supporting it all the way to the end. Because there are other people want other things too, and everything in here is going to be essential. But if you pull up against this bill, yours will come out. And I was chairing it, and I meant that. And that's exactly what happened. One called me, and he said, I just can't go along, from Florida. I can't go along. And I said, okay, let me take the Everglades out. That's because we're only going to go with people that's going to stand up for this bill every step of the way. He called me the next day, put it back in, I'll vote for it. So we had the votes, and we had the votes to override. That was the biggest override any president's ever gotten, because it was built upon what the people wanted and needed.
Right. Which is why it's so critical to make sure every person can vote and make it easier to vote. And it's certainly one of the things I know. I worked overseas a lot, and that we were telling other countries to make sure we made it easier for everyone to vote and to make it easier for everyone to participate in the voting process.
That's the only true democracy you have.
Right.
Whether you agree with it or not. I believe in it changing. So that, first of all, we can see just how bad some of these Republicans are. And that was meant to be funny. But what's important is that people vote for whom they want to vote for. And I think that when we can truthfully say that we have a free society to vote, we'll also have more respect for the results.
Absolutely. 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 That was a profound statement. 100% agree with you. That is a such an important piece that we forget. We get caught up in who votes, who doesn't vote, but really, when everyone votes, you respect and have trust
Yes.
in what that is believed. You know, there is a generation of young people, and I want to go back to, you were one of the biggest supporters of Hakeem Jeffries becoming the Speaker of the House, and I know you invested in him. I'd love to hear a little bit about that backstory. I think we would all appreciate how you have invested, and I would like to also go into what kind of advice are you going to give to the next generation of young people coming out of the LBJ School?
Thank you. Well, I tried to look, I had such a good group of people to work with going in. When you think about John Lewis and Charlie Rangel and John Conyers, Louis Stokes, Bill Clay, they were so committed. And I learned so much by going to them and asking them for direction. I said, I want to do this, tell me the best way. And it was such a value to me that I wanted to be the same value to new people coming in, if I thought they were willing to listen. And so there were several that I helped to groom through the way, and several members of the CBC leadership. And we knew the time was coming when we first had seen a lot of white male speakers on both sides. Then we got Nancy. And then I said, it is time for color. And we need to look at that as a real position, that where the person had the real ability to do it. Hakeem came in as a young attorney, extraordinarily bright. And I said to him, actually his first term, I said, I want you to start to pay more attention, make meetings. I want to see you move to the top. And he said, oh, I said, just do it. And so there were two that came in the same class. And one of my persons that I had pushed to become chair of the caucus was chair at the time. And I said, these two right here can move up. And so she appointed them to be leaders of the hour on the floor after procedures. And we know nobody listens to this but us, but at the end of proceedings, they have the 1 minute and the 5 minutes, and somebody might get an hour and cut it up. So we had CBC leaders, because otherwise you weren't gonna get anybody to volunteer to stay there because they knew nobody's watching it. So Hakeem always said, my mother was watching, Harsha's mother was watching, and EBJ was watching. But the thing is, it even showed more of their leadership and concentration of the seriousness of the responsibilities. And so every chance I got, I was saying, and I had a really good friend in leadership who wanted to be Speaker, Jim Clyburn. We had gone together, we had met back in '72, but he was almost as old as I am. And I knew it was time for a new generation. And so I got up one night and said at a banquet at just CBC fundraising, I said, I want all of you to think forward and think Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker. And the room got quiet, and then all of a sudden it was a big, and so the next day he came to me and his hands were real sweaty, and he said, why'd you do that? I said, because I mean that. And so from that I started to try to gather votes, knowing that I was going to be leaving and would not have a vote. I went to Progressive Caucus and got there, and I had organized a tri-caucus. When I got there, there was no Asian caucus, so I organized the Asian caucus. Now they got a lot of them. And then when I was chair, I organized a tri-caucus, which was a Hispanic, Black, and Asian caucuses, and appealed to them to look at him as a leader. And then I went, the last caucus I went to, which is the biggest caucus of the Democratic Party, was Progressive Caucus, and it's an Indian woman who was chair, and I pulled her aside and got her directed. So when his name came up, he got it unanimously. And that was a pride of top of my career ending. I think Harfine Jeffries will be the first African-American speaker when we get a majority again.
Well, we are at, we're at the LBJ School. They're producing the next generation of change makers. What is your best advice for these future change makers and how they should be thinking about, where they're coming into, and what advice do you give to them on working together for the common good?
Well, first of all, the future belongs to young people. And it cannot be seen as a willy-nilly thing. It's got to be seen as a real responsibility. And they've got to be ready for the responsibility. And it's greater than it's ever been before in life. It's the most challenging time. The world is larger, but smaller in a way, because there's so much communication. They got to be prepared. But they've got to accept the responsibility that it's on their plate. And so I would say to all younger people coming along, we are a leading nation. Every nation in the world would like to be like us. And I think they would if it was not for a few dictators. But we must continue to show that we are capable of leading the world as the most diverse population on the planet. And every one of those people must have the opportunity, the embracement of our nation that makes it great. When I was growing up, there was a black and white society. And now, everybody is a part of the leadership. This nation, no matter how you can criticize it, is the absolute best nation in the world. And I've seen 84 other countries. There just is no better country. But the democracy will depend on what we do. It's in all of our hands. It is up to us. And we must make sure that we embrace our young people and guide them and make opportunities, not always agree with them, but be there, because it is going to be in their hands. And they're more challenged than ever before in history. Because not only are they competing with the rest of the world, they're also competing with what started right here, technology. We have got to be on pace, and we cannot do it without us moving in the right direction all at the same time. We might be moving in different twists, different ideas, but that's what makes us whole. So let's embrace what we have, the greatest nation in the world, the most diverse nation in the world, and continue to be the best that best can be. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You stay seated. Congresswoman, it has been a sincere honor, and you are an incredible leader, legislator, but frankly, for someone like me, just a trailblazer, and appreciate everything that you have done. Thank you. And thank you to
Congresswoman, if you'll stay up here with us one moment, I have a brief surprise. If you want to take a seat for 1 second. So right before today's event, we got word from the Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries' office that they wanted to issue a proclamation, and our good friend Lyndon Boozer was able to bring that to us today, and I wanted to share a bit of that with you all today because I think it really speaks to the leadership, the mentorship, and the sponsorship that the Congresswoman has been able to deliver to the next generation. So I'd like to read a little bit of this. Congresswoman Bernice Johnson, I write to congratulate you on receiving the well-deserved honor of the Barbara Jordan Public Service Award. The late Congresswoman Jordan led a boundary-shattering life defined by her dedication to standing up for the least, the lost, and the left behind. I cannot think of a better, more fitting honoree than the first woman and person of color to serve as a chair of the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology and the U.S. House of Representatives. Your congressional accomplishments are numerous, including most recently shepherding into law a massive investment in American manufacturing and competitiveness. However, I believe the most defining part of your legacy is that while you may have been the first nurse in Congress and the first Black woman to hold the science gavel, you will not be the last. You personally mentored me with the sage wisdom of an experienced legislator from the moment I arrived in the House, as you have done for so many others who have had the privilege of serving with you. On behalf of the House Democratic Caucus, congratulations on the Barbara Jordan Public Service Award, and thank you for your selfless service to the city of Dallas, to Texas, and to Congress, and to the country. With gratitude, Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic leader. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. My name is Esteban Delgado, and I'm the Director for Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion at the LBJ School of Public Affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. Each year, I have the pleasure of advising the student chairs of the production of the Barbara Jordan National Forum. And even as an alumnus of this historic institution, I am impressed by the great care and thoughtfulness students of the LBJ School display in honoring both the legacy of Barbara Jordan and the public service of amazing heroes in our community, like the truly formidable Congresswoman Bernice Johnson. Please join me in congratulating the 26th annual Barbara Jordan co-chairs, Morgan Brown, Jordan Ellams, and Jennifer Perales, on the success of their efforts. You know, when I first started at the LBJ School 1 year ago, I had the distinct honor and pleasure of, I think, that very first week being introduced to the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation and being able to work with this amazing community partner. I'd like to recognize the President and CEO of the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation, Sam Bryant. Sam, thank you so much for this amazing partnership. I really enjoyed working with you again this year. Now, I'm pleased to introduce you to Daryl Talker, a board member of the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation, an organization dedicated to ensuring that Jordan's legacy and impact live on. Daryl.
Thank you, Mr. One.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, the mini documentary that you saw as we were coming in is part of a greater educational effort. And the Barbara Jordan Freedom Foundation, in collaboration with the University of North Texas Libraries and the Barbara Jordan Archives at the Texas Southern University, have launched the Barbara Jordan Extension Unit of the Texas History for Teachers portal. This is an open educational resource available to all districts, free of charge, taking all commerce out of the equation. All the content is mapped to the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills Standards and complete with lesson plans, interactive content drawn from authoritative resources, and personal and professional archives of Barbara Jordan. This open educational resource greatly increases the sources of availability to educational leaders and students, and presents a monumental force of Texas national politics, social justice, and civil rights, and much, much more. So please take our low-tech item home with you and visit our website at barbarajordanfreedomfoundation.org for a direct link to all these resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Daryl. And thank you again for joining us today for this special event with Congresswoman Bernice Johnson in conversation with Sonal Shah. Now we look forward to transitioning celebration of Congresswoman Johnson's award and work of the Barbara Jordan National Forum co-chairs with the reception in the Brown Room, which is directly behind us. In coordination with this reception, we are excited to have with us members of the Texas Legislative Black Caucus. This legislative session, the caucus is celebrating 50 years of leadership and service to the state of Texas. The caucus is an important legislative body that Congresswoman Johnson was a founding member of, and we look forward to commemorating this special occasion with them. So with that, I am going to formally close out this portion of our program, and if you'll please enter through these doors on the far end of the atrium, we will go ahead and get started with the reception. Thank you again for being here with us today.